The new version of React 19 introduces an amazing new hook called useOptimistic, and it helps simplify a very commonly used UI pattern. Say we have a user that has an account, and we store basic information about them, like the address, in our database. The user can view and update this information on a profile page. When they update their address, we send a request to a server, which updates the information in our database, and then sends us back the updated data. This whole process takes a few seconds, after which the user can see the new address. Though this is a very typical process, making the user wait for a few seconds before seeing the update can make your app seem a little slow. This is where the useOptimistic hook comes in. It provides a way of optimistically updating the user information before a background operation is complete. In the previous example, we can instantly show to the user the updated state, making an app feel responsive. This is especially useful for asynchronous actions that can take more than a couple of seconds to complete. And the syntax is pretty straightforward. Like other hooks, it's declared at the top of the component and takes in two props: state, which is a value that gets updated via async actions, and update function, which is an optional function that can be used to merge the state with the optimistic value. It returns two values: the optimistic state. If no asynchronous action is pending, this is the same as state. But if an asynchronous action is pending, this has the optimistic value. And add optimistic. This is the function that is called when we have an update. I know that's a lot to take in, but let me show you the hook being used in an example. This will give you a much better understanding of how to use the hook. Here we have a component that the user can use to update their name. It takes in two props. First is the current name, which is a string. The second is an asynchronous function that updates the name. I have mocked this to take 2 seconds. It has a form which displays the current name, an input to change the name, and a button to submit the form. Submitting the button calls the update name action, which then calls the update name function with the new name. Let's test this out by updating the name to like. There's a short delay and our name is updated. This delay is not that bad, but it does make an app seem a little slow. The useOptimistic hook can help make this look really quick. Let's start by importing it like any other hook and adding it to the top of our component. Pass to it the current name as a state prop. This is the default value. The first variable that the hook returns is the optimistic state. Let's call this optimistic name. The second variable it returns is a function to update the optimistic state. Let's call this setOptimisticName. Next, in the update name action, which is called when the form submits, set optimistic name to the new name. And then in the paragraph tag, instead of displaying the current name, we display the optimistic name. And lastly, we will disable the input when the current name does not equal the optimistic name. Let's see the difference in interaction. Then I'll break down the code. This time, I'm going to change the name to subscribe. And you can see that the name changes instantly and that the input was disabled for 2 seconds. This is because when the form is submitted, we right away update the optimistic name. And this is what we display in the paragraph tag. And the input stays disabled till the current name is updated to match the optimistic value. It's that simple, just 4 lines of code needed to use this cool new feature. But that was, well, the optimistic case. What happens if the update name call fails? I have now mocked the update name function to fail and not update the name. Let's see what happens. This time, I'm going to change the name to share. The name instantly changes, but in 2 seconds gets reverted to the original name. The optimistic hook itself handles the logic for when the update function does not result in the optimistic outcome. This really reduces the code and logic us developers need to add. I recommend using this hook for async actions that take a couple of seconds, but always result in a success, only failing due to unexpected circumstances like network errors. Okay, looking back at the syntax of the hook, there's one thing I haven't covered yet: the update function. This is useful when our state is an array or an object that we want to update. This can be like adding to a list, deleting from a list, or even updating a value in an object. Let's take an example where in our profile, we now store our favorite coding languages in the form of an array. We let our user add to this list using a form. Our languages component takes in 2 props: the favorite languages array and an asynchronous function to add a language to the list. It has an input and a button. Pressing the button submits the form, which then goes ahead and calls the add favorite language function. I have mocked this to take 2 seconds. Okay, let's test this out by adding JavaScript to the list. Like we expected, it gets added after 2 seconds. We've been here before. Let's use the useOptimistic hook to make this feel instant. I've already imported the hook, so let's start by using it. It's going to return 2 values, the optimistic favorite languages and the function to add a language to the optimistic favorite languages list. And it will take in 2 props, the favorite languages list as a state and the update function. This function itself has 2 props, the current state, which is the existing optimistic favorite languages, and the new optimistic value we want to add. For our languages list, we want to add new languages to the end of our list. So in our function, we will return a new array with all the existing languages first, and then a new optimistic value at the end. Okay, next, in the submit favorite action, before we call our async function, we will call the add optimistic favorite language function with the new value. This uses the logic we just set up to add the new value at the end of our optimistic list. Next, in our output, instead of looping through the regular favorite languages list, we're going to loop through the optimistic list. And finally, we want to disable our input when the list is updating. To do this, we just need to check that the optimistic list and the actual list don't match. This can be if their length is different or if any of the values are. Now when we run this code, the change is instant. This example was for an array, but objects work just the same. And these functions have built-in fallbacks too. So if the async function fails to add a language, the optimistic list just reverts to the original one. It does most of the work, keeping our lives simpler. And that's all there is to the useOptimistic hook. It's useful, easy to understand, and only takes a few lines of code to implement. I hope this video gave you a good understanding of how this new hook works. If there are use cases that you think might benefit from this hook, please let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, you can help me by liking and subscribing. I am the Helpful Coder, and thank you so much for watching.